Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and it's Tuesday, April 21st, 2009, and this is the Future of Education. We have a very special show today. Joining us are Chad Wick and Andrea Saveri, who are responsible for the new KnowledgeWorks 2020 forecast, Creating the Future of Learning. This should be a very fun show. We appreciate your joining us. We know it's earlier in the day than normal. We are recording as well, and we'll post that recording for others to listen to. If this is your first time in the Illuminate environment, we want to make sure that you have a quick understanding of what to do. You can see at the top row of your screen are some icons. If the guest asks a question and they'd like to get a response, we can actually do some polling, and we'll tell you what buttons to click up there, but you can see there's a green check and a red X, typically for yes and no. Down at the bottom of your participant window, you've got a smiley face, a clapping hand, a confused, and a disapproval sign. Please feel free to indicate. Clapping is a good way to say you find something interesting or exciting. If when we go to questions and answers you want to ask a question, you can use the larger icon with the hand and the green up arrow. And that lets us know that you'd like the microphone, and we'll give you the microphone to ask a question. You can send messages in the chat window. That's another way to participate. If you have a question that occurs to you during the session, please feel free to leave it there. You would think that by being able to send messages directly to other members in the session that would be private. But do know that the moderators see all messages. So if you do send a private message to someone else, we actually do see it as moderators. Didn't want you to be surprised by that. Okay, so this is very fun for me. I am so appreciative of KnowledgeWorks sponsoring the Future of Education interview series, and this is an exciting opportunity to learn more about KnowledgeWorks and the 2020 forecast. Chad and Andrea, welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Chad. Chad, can you tell us a little bit about what KnowledgeWorks is?
Yes, Steve. We are a not-for-profit that's about 10 years old that is committed to education transformation. In our work, we have mostly focused at the high school level, and we have a deep belief that public education is a wonderful institution that is to be nourished and cherished in our country. And yet we also believe deeply that the institution that formed our public education system needs to transform and deeply reflect the future that is illustrated in this discussion and in this map.
So what exactly is the 2020 forecast?
Well, the 2020 forecast literally is a document that reflects the major forces that are going to be shaping our world of learning. And I think it is a forecast that we believe represents so powerfully. Well, I should say that it's an adaptation of the proprietary work of the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, a partner of ours. IFTF produces their own proprietary map every year that does look forward a decade, and we asked them about 4 years ago to prepare a proprietary map that really looked at learning as a whole human area of focus. And so this is our second map, and so it is an illustration that we believe begins to help create a mental model of what the world of learning begins to look like.
So what was special about the first map, and what kind of response did you get to that, and why have you now decided to create a second map?
Well, the first map was initially created to help our own board of directors think about what we should be doing and investing and applying our own work to make sure that public education was vibrant and met the needs of our country's citizens. And so we retained Institute for the Future to help us take a look at that. When we were captured by the power of the story that was in that map, virtually every major systems change person I think in the world would say we're in an apocalyptic era, that this is a new time in the history of human society, and what it really means now to have the end of cyberspace and truly be in a digital world where I would say you might call it, and I certainly don't mean to offend history here, but the Second Emancipation Proclamation, that the power of the individual can be so magnified in this world that it just caused us to want to take the story to the broader public. So, in fact, as we began to share the map, the demand for it far outstretched anything we had ever expected. I think we literally printed and distributed around 50,000 plus copies. The government of Italy asked to print it in Italian, and I think we probably had another 50,000 downloads off our website. So it touched literally the full world, those interested in understanding how learning is becoming a major human need. So we then felt that the story, the mental model, when we talk about learning and the world of learning, moving from a world of schooling to a world of learning, there is such a need to create this mental model because people still process their view of education very much through old lenses and old understandings. And so because we mostly think in pictures, we believe we needed to create a literal picture that began to help people grasp what the new mental model was and see all of these forces and the context of the relationship of these many elements that are expressing the power of collective intelligence. And so we decided to create the 2020 forecast.
So it occurs to me that our ability to meet together in this way and to broadcast through the web is an example of the very power you're talking about.
Yeah, if those of you, it's pretty esoteric reading, but Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, it talked about the wisdom that, of course, many that exists within individuals, and so what being in the world that allows us to find each other is an amazing thing. And in fact, just what you're doing, it helps us develop our knowledge and understanding and give shape to the world of learning that will help, again, create the mental models that we need so that especially policymakers can begin to suspend their old views of the world and allow the new understanding to emerge and be acceptable.
So, Chad, you're the founding president and CEO of KnowledgeWorks. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
So, Andrea?
Thanks for giving us this.
Andrea, what's been your role?
Well, I was the lead researcher for both maps while I was at Institute for the Future. Now I'm an independent consultant working in foresight and strategy around education and technologies of cooperation in digital media and urban resilience strategies. And so those are all areas that come together in this map. So I've basically led the content development of both the 2006 map and this 2009 map, and has continued to work with KnowledgeWorks to bring it to this point.
Okay, so I'd like to bring up both the website and the map. Is there one you'd prefer I bring up first?
No, either one is fine.
Okay, so let's bring up the website first. And maybe you can tell us what we're seeing here. Are you seeing that on your screens?
Yeah, the website. And it actually might be better to do the map first. And then I think after we can show the website for how people can get engaged. If that, Chad, if that seems okay with you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
So what's the big story here?
Yeah. This is a great image. I mean, for me, when I think about the map, first of all, there's a lot of content in the map, and when I stand back, I go back to what Chad was saying, that one of the key pieces of the big story is that the drivers of change and the kind of 2020 landscape that the map shows really does support that we are moving from a world of schools, the institution of schools, to a world of learning. And in a way, we're doing that in the health area. If you think about healthcare and how healthcare has shifted from a focus on the institution and the focus on the hospital to a whole culture and lifestyle of wellness and a healthy lifestyle and health choices, everyday choices being guided by a health filter, the same thing is happening in education. We're moving to a world where the focus, I think, isn't on just schools and the institution, but all the ways that teaching and learning can be created and produced and shared, and all the ways that people can make everyday choices about learning. And so really moving to a world of learning and a world of personal relevance and personal fit in society and kind of personal development. And I think that's a huge mental model kind of shift as Chad was talking about.
So are there ways in which you would want to point out that the map differs from the first map?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of points that continue. One of them that continues is in the first map. We talked a lot about grassroots economics of smart networking and how that was really creating this expanded learning economy, this world of kind of market-based choices for learning, for open source, open educational resources, for this bottom-up creation of learning experiences. And I think that is continued in the new map. That's another story that runs through, that we are seeing this expansion of the creation and production of learning spilling out from the schools, in fact, emerging in interesting ways in communities, in the home, in different kinds of institutions with different kinds of players. And I think that's where there's a lot of exciting experimentation and innovation.
Chad, did you want to chime in?
Oh,
and this is
sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think one thing about the new map is that it's more hopeful and optimistic to me. When we did our first map, we were all kind of facing these. There was a dark side to it from the standpoint of many social issues that reflect a world that is urbanizing and sort of swamping infrastructures, and it took us a while to accept that and move past that to the notion that there still was a great story in it. But this map, I think, is really hopeful because it does reflect, I believe, what some might call the information age or the the knowledge age or even the relationship age. I think it really speaks to the age of learning. And what's exciting, I think, is that in the earlier map, it still was really playing out the notion of our society still being in very much moving from being a user society to a participating society, where we were growing. The story was very clear that we're comfortable participating in the creation of things like eBay and Wikipedias. But in this map now, it's very clear that we're moving to having much more confidence in just participating and actually making. And so when enough people begin to find their own communities of makers that share points of view, and they energize that, they're going to really challenge institutions and such as public school institutions, and so how we deal with keeping public school institutions a vibrant place that innovate and provide all of our kids learning opportunities is going to be a big challenge to us.
So part of what I think I'm hearing you both say is that the map is not necessarily a prediction as much as it is a way to start talking about fundamentally significant areas.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think Andrea can speak to that more about just what a forecast is. It's not a prediction, it's a forecast, and that's a really defined term, and I think she could maybe clarify that better.
Yeah, I mean, I think you started right out, Steve, that this is not a prediction. We're not saying that this is the way the world is going to look and this is the way that education is going to look. I think what the map is saying is here's a forecast of 6 critical drivers of change that are really the convergence of several trends coming together, and they're presenting us with choices, with sets of opportunities and challenges where we can make choices. And these drivers, as we look at them and ask ourselves, what do they mean for us, we can start to see options and start to take action in the present. We live in the present, not in the future, and so by standing in the future, we can get a better sense of what we need to do today and the kinds of choices we have and the kinds of actions that we can take. So this really is a resource to catalyze discussion, to catalyze making choices and decisions, and to catalyze action.
Andrea, did you go through the same sort of process of feeling that from the first map to the second map was a move toward optimism?
Yeah, I do, and it's really interesting because the first map, we did talk about things like the urban wilderness and the increasing rapid growth of cities, and then the rise of megacities. I think in 2007 the world shifted from the majority of the population living in urban areas, and so it was kind of a milestone. And what that really meant to live in an urban society. We talked about the shift to chronic illness from acute illness and kind of signs of biodistress, and that there was really a sick herd, and that health was really a pressing issue. We also talked about the challenges of technology, the end of cyberspace, and what that meant when we live in blended realities where digital and physical worlds start to integrate, and we can move between these worlds and really conduct our lives. It's unsettling in a sense. And then we also talked about grassroots economy that Chad was talking about earlier, this kind of bottom-up, open-source world of Wikipedia and eBay and smart networking where people can form groups and communities of action really easily with digital media and leverage their social networks. And so, there was this sense of making and creating and participating, but also these really heavy challenges and kind of some scary things in the first map. And I think this map starts to look at the kind of options for making and the kind of smart optimism around, well, this is what we have, what can we do? How can we amplify our organizations to make them smart, to develop collective wisdom, to really expand the boundaries of the school and of learning? How can we infuse our systems with resilience so that they can regenerate and create new solutions? How can, in a new civic discourse, if you're looking on the page you have up, those are the 6 drivers right there. In a new civic discourse, it asks the question, how can we use these new civic literacies that we're seeing in participatory media, where we can make things transparent, we can do bottom-up monitoring and expose and make aware what's going on in our communities. How can we do that to create new publics where we can discuss and debate our rights around learning and education and include more people in that discussion? And then the maker economy, which is really the combination of that kind of smart networking and civic discourse and participatory activity with new technologies of production like 3D printing and computer-controlled lasers, which are basically the machine shop has become democratized. And so places like the tech shop, which is basically like a Kinko's machine shop where anyone can go in and learn how to make artifacts, tools, components, jewelry, a component for an air conditioner, little parts. So it's totally democratized production and given local communities this productive capacity to create their own solutions. So those are just some examples of some of the drivers and how they're really, I think, moving us beyond the fear and some of the gloom to, no, we do have the tools and the capacity to create our new future of learning. And that's why this, I think, is a very exciting map.
So that really resonates with me, and partly because I think in the last couple of years we've seen such fascinating examples that are positive in the personal and the business worlds, where this change has been really positive. Chad, do you expect that teachers or educators, those involved in education, are going to have to battle a little the fear associated with the change? And how can we help them see the optimism that you're seeing in the forecast?
Well, that is indeed a challenge. I mean, we're still trying to get teachers to grind up 10-year-old laminated lesson plans, So change is it's relative, and in some cases, change we would think is pretty minor. It's major for those in our education system. But I think that more and more we're seeing teachers come to respect the ability of their students to co-create, and I think it's going to be somewhat of a relatively I wouldn't call the change curve steep, but then I think we'll see a spike. I do believe that we're personally, I think there will be some kind of geometric recognition of what collective intelligence means, both within teacher corps and the notion that kids indeed, in a different form, for instance, where kids learn together and through project-based learning, for instance, and they're truly in a digital environment that they can do amazing things and do them very, very quickly, and co-create curriculum that used to be, of course, very top-down. So It's going to be a while, but I think that we are starting to see places in certain school environments where this is taking hold. I think it also is, we help the field by giving them a rationale to follow where they inherently see kids going, and in the absence of a document like this map or the conversations that can be created by this map, it's hard for a teacher who wants to change their practice and really embrace the wisdom of their kids and see themselves as more of an expert learner than being the proverbial sage on the stage, that they'll feel way more empowered and able to step out and do that. That's why I think we'll start to see more of a geometric change process as this is embraced in deeper conversations. And I think it also will help communities accept this new mental model of kids as co-creators of knowledge and not just passive recipients.
Could I add
Andrea?
something, Steve?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying there, Chad. And the other thing it makes me think of is I think that this map has the potential to bring in other people into the discussion, and also the whole process that you were talking about, project-based learning and inquiry-based learning, and using the tools and being more in the community. I think it has this potential to really open up learning and make it more visible, so that the whole role and status of teachers and educators, I think, can be elevated and really become more visible and transparent in communities. And so the possibility that learning can really take on this new role in communities because it's transparent, it's participative, it's collaborative, it brings in other kinds of learning agents in the communities. So teachers are at the forefront then of something that's very exciting and edgy, with their students. So in a sense, I see that positive side too. And while for many there may be uphill battles in their own schools and districts, I think there are so many other people that could be brought into this whole dynamic that could really help. So that educators aren't alone, that there are other people now in the community with a stake in all of this, that they're not going to be building this new future world of learning on their own. It's not just educators. It's the people who are making the tech shops and the maker economy, little fab labs, and the civic spaces, and so it's I think a more holistic kind of endeavor here.
So we're on page 7 of the forecast, 7 of 10. Andrea, do you want to give a little bit of an overview of where people could go here? I'm just going to go back to the beginning pages to show everything that's here. And we've obviously gone to page 7 for a reason. But if we go to page 7, do you want to talk a little bit about the organization from here?
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of jump into a lot of the content, and I think what would be helpful now is if I just explain kind of the main components of the content of the map as it's organized. So what you're looking at right now is the top part of the map, which has the 6 driving forces of change. And the way we define driving forces of change is that these are major forces of transformation that we think are going to shape how we remake learning. And each of these is really a convergence of several trends into some kind of emerging idea or phenomena that we think is disruptive. And that will probably challenge traditional narratives, challenge assumptions about learning. And the other thing about these 6 drivers is when you look at them, we realize that, this really is dramatic change, because each one of these is really talking about a major disruption in a core kind of relationship we have. Altered bodies is really the relationship with ourselves and our whole bodies and our health and our body in place in our physical environment. The amplified organization is our relationship with people, how we come together and organize and create and collectively take action. And the platforms for resilience is our relationship to systems and the relationship of components in a system and how they can become more resilient and generative of new solutions. The civic discourse is our relationship with society is changing. The digital media, participatory media, is completely changing the possibilities for how an individual and how groups can form and change the public space and create multiple public spaces. The maker economy is about the changing relationships in production and microeconomies and local economies vis-a-vis regional and global economies. And I think the local agency that individual communities could gain in maker economies. And then pattern recognition is our whole relationship to knowledge and data. With all these tools we have and the sensors and sensor networks, we're generating tons of data. And the challenge is really our relationship to that and how we extract meaning from it. So one of the big areas there are tools for visualization. This map is a tool for visualization, actually, how we can visualize complex data and information in a way that is easier to make sense and helps the human process of making better decisions. So those are all very fundamental relationships. And so those are the drivers, which if you want to get the top story of the map, kind of the big story, you might start up here at the top of the map and read those kind of taglines and the paragraphs that kind of tell the big story. And if you go to the middle of the map, which is, those are the trends. So each one of those driving forces of change has a set of anywhere from 3 to 5 trends. And we define a trend as a distinct direction of change that points to some kind of new pattern or new behavior or new concept that will shape learning. And so here, these are individual trends that kind of create that driver of change. And these are really interesting to look at. Whoops. Something just closed my, there we go. These are interested if you want a little more meat on the bones of those drivers of change. Well, exactly what, how does altered bodies, work? What does that really mean? Oh, it's the intersection of this trend of biodistress and enabled innovation, or looking at amplified organization. Oh, I can see here that there's a trend of open leadership being associated with that. So you get a little more flesh on the bones there. And then if you really like details and kind of concrete examples, the bottom level of the map there are signals. And signals are examples or early indicators of the changes that we talk about in the trends and the driving forces. So they're real examples or a data point or a project that we think is something that kind of gives a concrete example or an early idea of what this future idea, the future concept is. So we have, for example, in amplified organizations, we have things like Moodle or Dig or the Flat Classroom Project as examples of amplification of a learning community or a classroom to give some real detail. And so that's kind of the heart of the map. So if you like big picture, big story, start from the top. And if you like details and specifics and kind of concrete stories, you might want to start from the bottom.
So Chad, are there drivers or trends in the map that particularly feel salient or important to you?
Yes, the one that in particular that I resonate to is the maker economy, that is a continuation of this notion that we are growing past just participating to directly being involved in not just our health well-being, but our intellectual well-being, that we're really assuming a much deeper ownership over our need to know, and that we are not depending on hierarchical institutions to create and define core knowledge, but that we now have the tools, and more importantly now, what this map would predict or forecast is that we have the confidence to use those tools to meet our own needs. So again, so that it isn't just assuming well-being for our physical selves, but also our intellectual selves. I think that is, to me, one of the most powerful notions, because then I also, if I have confidence in doing that, I have confidence in being part of the new civic discourse. And as an individual, then I can very much help amplify my school. And in fact, I would want to emphasize, we in no way are even suggesting or implying that we don't have a need for schools. It's what happens when we organize ourselves into a learning environment that creates learning for everyone and respects everyone's individual needs and learning styles. And I think how we then recognize patterns gets to how we then can begin to develop new forms of assessment of learning and get past the era when we tried to move ourselves by high-stakes testing and measures of sort of minimum performance instead of seeking to assess for success in learning in every individual. I think pattern recognition will have the tools to do that, and I think we'll have the confidence, and on the periphery, we're going to have people who are very comfortable with finding those patterns and bringing them into the mainstream. That's a very exciting idea, that we will not have to depend on hierarchically developed solutions to influence the system. The periphery is going to continue to evolve phenomenal, I think, insights about how people learn, and then how we can measure that, and that will hopefully move us into a far more productive way of assessment.
Andrea, what about you? What ended up being your favorite things to think about?
Yeah, I like to look at intersections across these drivers, which is another fun way to kind of engage with this, is to pick one trend from one driver and one from another. And when I look at the map, I also kind of look at maker economy with platforms for resilience and amplified organization together, and kind of piggybacking on Chad's comment. Those are very powerful changes because, as Chad is saying, they power up the periphery and they power up individuals. The capacity to form a group that can really take action and develop collective action. And some of this comes from Clay Shirky's book, Here Comes Everybody, which is one of the signals in platforms for resilience. What that tells me, what Chad is telling me about having this data and being able to visualize it, and the amplified organizations saying, you can amplify your individual and collective capacity to sense and make sense of data, and your productive capacity to make things, is that the kind of local agency that I think could be unleashed by these forces is incredibly optimistic and positive, in that it really could lead, I think, to a renaissance in how we think about learning and where and how it happens, what gets measured, what we do with that data, how we can address individual issues around learning and individual needs. So what excites me about it is the tremendous amount of individual and kind of group agency that we see in these forces as they come together to really make new in quote-unquote institutions in entirely new ways, and really remake the fabric of our society at the community level. And that, to me, that is incredibly important when you think about what Chad said at the very, very beginning about, we value public education, but, maybe the institution has to go as we know it. And so the possibility for a really creative new public system of learning that is resilient and distributed and bottom up, and in a way that really reflects the needs and the desires and the passions of local neighborhoods and communities. That's a big transformation, and that really excites me to continue to work with this map.
So interesting from both of your descriptions. It feels like that Flat Classrooms project that Julie Lindsay and Vicki Davis do is kind of a great example of that. Coming from within the public school tradition, but being very much kind of proactively created and creating a whole new way of accomplishing a certain form of education. Are either of you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. In fact, it's one of our signals. I think it's under probably amplified. Yeah, it's under amplified organization. That's a great example, Steve, because not only is that classroom being amplified, but other communities and parts of other communities are brought into that process. And by the fact that they use Web 2.0 tools, wikis and videos and blogs and all of that, what Chad was talking about, the sharing of knowledge to make, they're not keeping that innovation among themselves. They've unleashed that now to the world, and they've diffused that. So our capacity to grow know-how and to share that kind of know-how that comes from a local expert or some local artisan or creator or inventor is now open for everybody. So I can go say, wow, that looks really great, and I can create my own flat classroom project and innovate off of that and contribute it back into the commons, as it were. And so that's a completely different basis for thinking about both the creation and the creation of learning and the experience of learning and how that gets shared.
Are there specific ways that either of you would feel really gratified if the map were used to accomplish something specific? Are you hoping that people will get together and talk about the map? Are you hoping that there are going to be some kind of outcomes that you can measure and say, hey, I think we made a difference?
Chad, I'll let you start on that one.
This is Chad. Okay. Well, I would, in our old map, it's still very much alive because we're just in the middle of it. But it made a highlight of the power of our need to know, and this, what we coined the term in there called a learning economy. And how many people, of course, will respond to that. Economies create opportunities and are made up of individuals, whether they exploit it or use it, however. But there are many players that in this country, the learning economy, the formal learning economy, it does approach $1 trillion. So there's a lot of resources. The whole media side of this is recognizing the way people are going to learn and are starting to invest heavily in gaming and things like that. So what I am hoping, though, is that we would begin to see the power of the individual emerge and not just the marketplace capture the kind of defining of how learning shapes the system. That for instance, if any of you saw in the football playoffs, I know that's where I saw it, Kaplan began to run very, very high-end TV ads saying that come to us, that we recognize the system has failed you. We want to respect each and every one of you as individual learners. We can help you assemble your learning better than if you go to the institution. And I appreciate that message very much, but I hope that it isn't just the marketplace and our way of organizing resources around making money that defines how this comes out. And so if the map were to stimulate and in the same way I talked about giving an individual teacher a sense that, boy, I'm really kind of authorized to act the way this map is talking about, that more people on the periphery find each other and help to define the way the individual could learn and have a role in shaping that, I feel very gratified than just a new marketplace solution kind of emerge, because there's a lot of money to be made of people who need to know things. They're going to spend money, and you know, lo and behold, a big retail establishment now starts creating new kinds of schools. While you shop, come over here and learn, and that could be part of it, but I would hope we can own that a lot more. Another way, and then I'll let Andrea get in here, but is that we continue to spend a lot of money just on bricks and mortars in this country every year, something like $50 billion on new school buildings, and many of these school buildings are still being built on a pretty standard square foot student formula, and we're not thinking about a building that has to serve learners 50 years from now. And if this map could help people understand the way learning is going to influence the structure and have them consider literal school design around these forces, I think we would feel that we've impacted that use of those resources very positively. Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I think would be really exciting is to see a very bold innovation agenda, you know, come out from people who are, you know, use this map. If through, you know, groups of people who are either within education or on the periphery or outside, you know, saw this map and started working with it. And I would love to see someone take this and create a very bold agenda for how to innovate, not just inside the system, but outside the system, to make a new world of learning. I mean, I think about people, there was just a story in our local paper, the San Francisco Chronicle, about someone who had never done one character of programming in her life and started making iPhone, you know, applications. And I just think that the ability to see innovations in mobile technologies and applications to help people navigate the new learning economy, find new ways to get access to learning resources, understand choices around learning, how they can create their own kind of learning geography in their own community, experimenting with new kinds of services and new kinds of places for learning. I would love to see a bold innovation agenda, and I would love to see communities use this map to think about how do we think about learning in our community, not just in our schools, but how do we design and plan the future of our community based on a learning lifestyle and a learning imperative. And to me, that would be you know, something that integrated health, you know, economics, the maker economy, learning, technology, and would really be a kind of step forward, I think, in trying to get at a lot of issues that all impact learning.
So I really enjoyed hearing both of those visions. I think I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for the interview series right now, because I think in some ways we do have some very fun topics coming up. We are definitely going to drill down on the different drivers in the map and have some very exciting speakers who are going to help participate in that. Susan Patrick from the North American Council on Online Learning, Michael Horn, co-author of Disrupting Class, Michael Wesch, who is just this cultural anthropologist who's gained such fame and interest because of his class and videos. Chris Deedy from Harvard, John Seeley Brown on innovation and tinkering in the maker economy, and then David Thornburg. So I was going to leave that for the end, but I thought I'd make a little bit of a plug now for that. I think it might be good to take some questions. Chad and Andrea, are you both comfortable with opening that up just for a bit?
Sure.
That's great.
So if anybody has any questions, just either you can raise your hand using that hand icon with the green up arrow, or you can post them in the chat. And while you're doing that, and while we're waiting for questions, I'd be interested in making sure that people know how to get the map. And I had put up the website, and I'm assuming that's the best place for people to go to actually pick up the map.
Yeah, I think on the...
Yes, and if there are groups that need hard copies, they can go to the website and we can get a request in for copies.
Great, and we didn't really show much of the site, but here you can actually click on the driver topics and drill down and learning more. It looks like a great way to experience the map on the web. And then up at the top you can see a Get Your Copy link, which asks you, I think, to log in to request a copy.
And I believe also, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, that on the website here, this isn't just you view the map in a static way, that it is, you can drill down through layers of the map, and that there are spots here where, as there are articles and kind of things happen in the news and studies get released, that resources are being kind of currently posted by the drivers that they relate to. So it's kind of a living forum for engaging with these ideas.
Yeah, very much so, and blog opportunities. We will continue to hopefully, see it kind of become a wiki of sorts of conversations and additional ways people are perceiving the change.
Okay, I'm going to close that down, and I'm actually going to open up the survey for today's show. And if you are in the audience there and would be willing to fill this out, it's very helpful to us. We do want to encourage you to come back. We have some great shows coming up. And while that's going on, if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in. In the meantime, Chad and Andrea, any last words, anything you're hoping people will really take away from learning more about the forecast today?
Well,
Go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I was just going to encourage people, to really get the map and play with it. It's not the future cast in concrete by any means. That this is a document, a resource that's meant to be played with, shared, pointed to, commented on, criticized. It's meant to move people to try to make change, and so. To really use it and reflect on how it might create action, in your own lives as educators, administrators, or policymakers, whatever.
And just to add on that, already from at least one experience, it's a great way to have a community conversation, because it does help create that mental model of the various forces in a way that we can talk about it. And some fascinating questions come up that people just otherwise probably couldn't get to in that way. And so I too would really urge that it be used to help organize discussions about recognizing that we're in an era where our kids have enormous ability to co-create their learning with us, and let's take advantage of that and start the conversation about what is the system's implication from that belief.
Okay, that was really a wonderful show for me. I'm gonna hit the clapping button here. I want to express appreciation, Chad and Andrea, to both of you for taking the time and for providing this opportunity, both today and in the map, to have these discussions. Thanks to KnowledgeWorks for sponsoring the Future of Education interview series. Thanks to Illuminate for providing the hosting. Thanks to Catherine, Colleen, and Jesse for doing the background work and getting everything set up. And thanks to those of you who have attended or are listening to the show later. If you have any questions, please feel free to come on futureofeducation.com. I'm going to, you can pull the survey web tour away to see the whiteboard. And if you do so, I'm going to make sure that you know to go to futureofeducation.com for the interview series, and for KnowledgeWorks, futureofed.org or kwfdn.org. Again, thanks, Chad, and thanks, Andrea.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.